glasses.
Yeah. Well, there's a chance we're live now, so. And we are live. Okay, we're joined this hour by Maria Martinez, professor of history at LA Trade Tech, as well as the editor, one of the member of the editorial board of Tribunal del Pueblo. And we're going to talk about your education, or hopefully we talk about our educational journey, as well as looking at the current moment and the politics of today. So can we let's start from the beginning. Tell us about your educational journey.
Yeah, so my family lived in Compton during the 80s. My father was a welder at a shipyard in San Pedro. So during the Reagan years and his buildup of the Navy, my dad spent many years working as a welder. He welded in these closed tanks that many welders poisoned their lungs. So he ended up with kidney failure and was disabled right around when I was in high school. That matters because I later do my thesis on and focus a lot on the deindustrialization of Los Angeles. And my thesis in grad school was actually the closure of Todd Shipyard in San Pedro and the role of the union and communists in the union during that era. But yeah, he loved his job. He loved being a union guy. I think he loved the drinking probably just as much as the union. But when I was little, I grew up hearing, he was at a union meeting and he comes, stumbling home in his, big work boots and, yellow hat and metal lunchbox. So I was, grew up wondering, what is this union, thing that he does that he goes to? But he loved his job and he loved the union that he was in. And they both of my parents were immigrants. They were born and raised in Mexico City. So like, a lot of us, oh, we came here for you. You got to do good and you got to. I was like, God. So like a sucker, I kind of fell for it. So I was a pretty good student most of the time. I was able, but in the 80s, I was able to get into UCLA. Um, my parents were able to, as working class people, able to spend, I want to say, $300 a quarter plus my books. And that was all that they paid out of pocket for me to go to UCLA.
Wow.
And it was not that long ago. I'm not that old. So this is not, this is not what students are experiencing right now. Um, I got into the School of Engineering. I, had this idea of, you know, I thought about history, but I didn't think of it as a discipline. Like most people, I thought history was boring about, the past and, wasn't sure how it mattered in my life. The things that mattered were the things you could see and touch. My dad, built Navy ships. So I got to go and with my brothers and sister to watch, these big giant warships get launched into the ocean and travel around the world. And, my dad used to say, none of the ships that I ever worked on ever sank, and he never got a chance to go anywhere. But again, this idea that the ships that he touched and he worked on, were in Singapore, were, all over the world, seemed to, matter to him. So I wanted to build bridges. I wanted to build something that would be around long after I was here, something that people can touch and use and see.
Yeah.
So I got into the civil engineering program at UCLA. But it turns out I was not prepared to succeed in college level coursework. So I was tested and deemed remedial, even though I had a B average going in. They said I wasn't ready in math or English, so I had to take the summer and one semester of classes, supposedly to get me ready. Then I took calculus for engineers and failed. It was horrible because this time I was the good one in the family. I was the one who worked hard and got good grades. So that was really surprising and a really different experience than I had ever had. I had never been around kids that went to Santa Monica High School or to, you know, all these other areas. I had only, been around Compton and Linwood kids, So that was really devastating for me. And I took it again, of course, because my mom said if I came home, I'd end up cleaning toilets. Um, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but they were pushing me to do more, and I wanted to build, bridges. So I passed the second time with the C, barely passed, and was not doing good in any of the STEM, right, the math and science classes. And I guess at that time, it was not popular to ask why there were not women engineers, why there were not people of color in these math and science fields. In fact, the engineering counselors basically, oh, I also took my first Chicano studies class while I was failing calculus. So that kind of really helped me understand the context for my own experience. And I realized that the issues and the forces at play, the economic and political and historic forces at play, were not, were broad, right? And affected me, affected my dad, affected my community, my brothers, who did not go to college at first, that they, were machinists, they were going to work with their hands like my father did. So two things happened. As I started to understand these forces, I started to connect with the struggle of the people before me, right? My own people, my own community.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me. And I wanted to be a part of that. At the same time, the engineering department said, "You're taking up a seat that should go to someone else," and suggested that I continue to take classes on the other side of campus. And so I ended up, with a degree in Chicano studies. Um, I was at UCLA during the hunger strikes of the early 90s.
Yeah.
I was not a student leader at that time. My dad had already been disabled out of work, so my family made ends meet. My mom really championed our family by selling at the swap meets every weekend. So every weekend, Saturday morning, I would ride this little scooter that was barely street legal at
Yeah.
fucking 5 a.m. to get from UCLA to Gardena. So
Gardena.
to Gardena, it took me an
Damn.
hour and a half. My eyes were all teary eyed,
Yeah.
and I would get there, and my brothers and my sister, my mom and dad would set up our little puestecito and
Yeah.
sell our shit every Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
So I was not super active on campus. I remember during the hunger strikes bringing water a couple of times, maybe once a week. That was really the level of my involvement at the time. But because the struggle was for a Chicano studies department that did not exist. And I really didn't get to benefit from it because as soon as it was established, I graduated.
Mm.
So technically, me and another person, two of us graduated, were the first graduates of the Chicano Studies department, even though, it was established the year we were leaving.
Yeah.
But that was really, really important effort at UCLA that even if it was just to be there and play a minor, minor role, I was really happy that I got a chance to be there.
Yeah, so for our audience who's not aware, I mean, well, first I just observation, or the first question was, so your dad, would he get drunk at like the Ports of Call Village? Is that where he was? Is that where he's at?
Yeah, yeah, there was a bar on Gaffey right across the street, and
Yeah,
all the shipyard workers would go there. So every time that it was payday was
yeah,
the main day.
yeah. I know Ports of Call even before the crisis was a lot of parts of it was closing down, the Ports of Call Village, but it was kind of funny. Like that was a place you could go and you felt like you were walking back into the 1970s when like working class people could like have just a working class job and make enough money to like spend a couple $100s on like a lobster dinner for the family and get all drunk and like but you didn't feel like they were spending the kind of money you would spend in a fancy restaurant, but this was not it's not a fancy environment.
Yeah.
So, like, I have to save up to go to Ports of Call and have a good time, but like this was very casual kind of thing. So it's a throwback to a time when working class people still had like well-paying jobs, and because the ports are kind of last place, right?
Yeah, a funny story. So it was not nearly as developed as it is now. It was mostly, fresh seafood coming in and in these big white bins. And so we would spend time there. My dad, I think, always would have loved to live in San Pedro, but I don't think we could afford it. So we stayed in Compton the whole time. But we spent a lot of time there, and my older brother learned how to pick the crabs, from the back out of the big white water tanks. And, again, it was working class. It was kind of multicultural, but also very Latino, right?
Yeah.
Too. So, my brother taught me how to do it. And then I remember them mostly being white ladies, but that would pay us like 10 cents for every, they say, give me that one. And we'd stick our hand in there, grab it, and put it in their bag. And we'd make like 10 cents, right? For
Yeah.
every crab that we picked up because they didn't want to stick their hand in there.
You got your own little hustle, your own side hustle there.
Oh, you don't know about hustle. Well, you do know about hustle,
What
actually.
are you talking about? I got 10 interviews there. Anyways.
But I
But
mean,
no, I like it. I like it.
hustle, since we're on that,
Yeah.
well, as an industrial worker, there were periods where my dad would be out of work,
Hmm.
right? So sometimes he'd manage to get it, like he worked at Bethlehem Steel for a little piece, and then he got called back to the shipyard. And sometimes he didn't, or he'd just wait out until they called him back to work. And so
Yeah.
there were times where, we did all kinds of things from, they were called raiteros. We would give people rides to TJ, so my dad would get the station wagon, and my brother and I were little, and we'd go down to the Greyhound station downtown and basically, skim away riders and drive them to we'd fill up the car and then drive to TJ, and they'd pay us for the gas and a little extra money. We collected aluminum cans. I don't know if I should say this, but my dad was smart. He would have us fill them up halfway with sand, and then he had this like big rock, and he would have us crush the can so no one would see it, and the sand wouldn't come out. So I
I think
estamos in the backyard. We thought it was a game, my brother and I, filling it up and then the thing and throw it over here. And little chiquillos, in the backyard.
yeah,
So that's what I mean by hustle,
yeah. I think the statute limitations on recycle fraud, the
Don't
problem,
tell. You never know.
and no snitching. Um, so oh man, that's hilarious. No, it's interesting. I always thought of I always thought of my family as relatively apolitical because later on I would get so explicitly involved in politics, right? But then I hear stories from when my grandfather was on strike, and he took the boys to the strike, and he wanted he wanted them to see what a strike was. It was I think working RCA, and he wanted them to see what a strike was, and so he took them there, and it was really important for him to do that. And meanwhile, my mother and my grandmother and my aunt, they were like sewing, for to
Mm-hmm.
keep the family, eating. So like there was like all this kind of very very like proletarian traditions, even if nobody ever talked about it that way, even if no one ever talked about like the working class, whatever. These conditions existed totally independent of like
Yeah.
the way we talk or the what we or what we tell each other. It's
Yeah.
just do it.
Yep. Yeah. That's really interesting because it really was in school that I learned the words that go with my experience. And so I guess in that way, we were living it, right? You knew things in your stomach, but you didn't have words for them.
Yeah,
So for me, anyway, that's what being political and then studying political economy and political theory is. It kind of gave me a framework. History gave me a context, but
yeah,
this kind of political and economic study gave me power.
yeah. Well, that makes absolute sense. I mean, that makes incredible sense. So I'm very curious though about specifically just you as an individual going through these things, like because like higher education. I mean, like we've had a number of conversations, deeply racist, and especially we as Mexican people, our intelligence is constantly questioned at every stage and every level. And the higher we get, the more it's questioned, the more it's like almost like we did something wrong
Yeah.
by being so smart. So could you talk about like some of your early experiences of being punished for being a smart Mexican?
um Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind, well, first of all, it's funny because when you're poor and you go to school, um, I and I think most of us didn't really have the luxury to think about what we wanted to do with our lives away from the context of like we got to pay our bills and I don't want to work the way my parents worked. Working every single weekend. I didn't have sleepovers. I didn't have a sport or an art or anything that I did besides school and those swap meets. And I'm talking in the rain, in the cold, in the heat. Nothing stopped us from working like that. So when we go to school and we get degrees, at least for me, it really was like, how do I not be poor no
Yeah,
more? Right.
right,
Um,
right.
so while I got kicked out of the engineering department and I was embracing history and political science, I still knew I needed to like have money and that and I well, two funny stories. One is when I told my dad that I was not going to be an engineer, that I was going to get a degree in Chicano studies, and my dad was like, I did not send you to school to go learn about this Chicano studies shit. Like, first of all, he was Mexicano. He didn't use the term Chicano. That was something that I, you know, um, connected with, right? My experience here and my identity here. So he was like, plus what kind of job are you gonna get? Like if that got us anywhere, I would have already been there, right? So
Right,
what is this?
right, right,
And
right.
so I explained, so I had, luckily my father was, really wonderful. He grew up in the 50s in Mexico City, right? So in the era of political, of explosion and art and politics, right? He was a contemporary of so many of Mexico's best political theorists. In the decades after the Mexican Revolution, that a working class kid like my dad, who was a taxi driver in Mexico City, and people outside of the U.S., even if they don't go to school, somehow they understand class struggle. So my father never, I don't think he finished elementary school.
Right.
He could read and write, but and he read the paper religiously every day. But he didn't finish high school or middle school even, I think. So I sat down and explained to him why I was going to be, move, and why it was important to me to get a degree in Chicano studies. And he said, he listened for a long time, and then he just shook his head and he goes, "Ya sabía que eras grillera." And I didn't know what that meant, right? So I was like, I know grillo meant grasshopper, right? So I was like, what is he? Is it like I'm an insect? Is this good? Is this bad? I mean, I knew my dad, right? So I knew he wouldn't say anything mean to me. But it was a long time actually before I understood what he meant by that, right? That I'm a troublemaker.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. Took me. So just transitioning to Chicano studies, right? And the way they push us into ethnic studies, which I love it, right? But you know, yeah, what kind of job, was I going to have? I didn't know. So again, I'm no fool. I know how to get my hustle on too. So I completed all the coursework to sit for the CPA exam. And I was like, well, if I'm around money, I might get a chance to have some, right? So, I mean, that's how basic my thinking was,
No,
I
no, no,
didn't
of
know
course.
about,
That
you
makes
know,
sense.
and so I did. I took all the coursework to sit for the CPA exam. And if you know about corporate capital, you know that there's been especially in the 80s and 90s, a consolidation of corporations, right? So
Yeah.
the big eight accounting firms are now maybe, went down to four and now might be two or three, and they're global, right? They have their hands in pots all around the world. So, during that time, they recruited heavily from UCLA and USC, and I was in the Student Accounting Society, and, where they told us how to act and how to dress, when we went into the downtown LA high rises, which I got to go as a student with the, seafood spreads and, just, kind of, drooling, right, about the opulence that, certain people get to be around.
Right.
And so I was in an interview at the end of my senior year with Price Waterhouse
Mhm.
accounting firm. And this old white dude is interviewing me, and he's looking at my resume, and he looks at my major, and he is like, he couldn't even pronounce it, like, what is this? Chicano studies? And like,
You
what
couldn't
is
even
this?
remember.
And I kind of just looked at him, kind of like, what are you doing here? You're, you know, and just the whole thing was so ugly,
Yeah.
just looked down on me in such a horrible way that I just kind of sat there and I couldn't answer, because the thing I thought of in that moment was, this is going to be the rest of my life, being around these people, having to explain over and over again who I am or what I am. And I walked out.
Yeah.
I did not pursue engineering or accounting. I think in that moment decided that I needed to be around my people, and working on the side of improving conditions for all of us.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant, right? It was just this feeling that kind of came up in my stomach. Um, so I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do for food? Like, or for a job. My parents kind of really expected something to happen. I was the first in my family to go to college. And, how do you go? Because they're trying to get in, right? They're trying
Yeah.
to move up in the socioeconomic ladder. And I'm like, how do I come back and say I want to smash this thing? Um, so that's my answer to your question.
Yeah. So okay, so wow, that's a lot. I mean, geez. So you come home, it's kind of interesting. You describe your father, and then some of the tendency. It reminds me a little bit of Bill Withers, right? When you talked about like his songs are one thing, but he built toilets, and then people could use those toilets, right? I'm gonna build a bridge. I'm gonna build something someone could touch. Um, okay, so you come home, you tell your dad, Dad, I'm not gonna be engineer. I'm gonna be a Chicana. Um, and then but he's still trying, be practical, and you get thrust out of that world. I mean, it's such a horrible story because I mean, it's a painful story. I shouldn't say horrible. It's a painful story. It's a story with some painful chapters because I mean, like, higher education is so racist and very sexist as well, and engineering is so deeply STEM is so just deeply it's racist, but it's so deeply sexist. I mean, just such a bunch of bros running around. Um, yeah, I mean, like that, the way they push people out is just it's really horrible. So, but you're making you made your stand. You had you saw something, you saw something ahead of you. You saw the road ahead, and you pursued that. You pursued that, and you are now a professor of history at LA Trade Tech, which is a very very working class school. I mean, you're amongst the people that you achieved exactly what you wanted to. I mean, you got where you wanted to be. You're financially in a good position for yourself, and you're also teaching people history that they can use. I mean, you're teaching the people who need it. So that's really great. So, but between this terrible episode with these horrible racist accountants and today, and the mountaintop, what comes in the middle?
Well, family, right? I had the opportunity to, you know, not only be married, but more importantly, be a mother. So I've raised two boys who identify as Blaxican, and in a way to, I think, make up. Um, I guess every generation, right, looks to the next generation to achieve something beyond what they did. So in my case, both of my sons are, math and science people, right? My older son got a degree in mathematics, and my youngest is struggling his little ass off trying to complete a degree in biochemistry.
Hmm.
So they are, both going to be able to succeed in those disciplines. Although I'll tell you, my oldest son had a similar experience, where he ended up double majoring in mathematics and sociology, and he, de panzazo passing all the time, right, in these math classes. So his counselor too was like, maybe you should just drop the math part and just do sociology. And he'd call me up and he'd be like, Mom, this is what the counselor tells me. And, I can't do good on the test, but I get it. I understand it. I just can't show it on the way they want me, to show it. So, of course, I now, he had what I didn't have, which was, someone who understood a little bit more and could orient him. And I was like, no, you go back and you tell them your failure is not yours, it's theirs, right? They're an
Right.
institution of fucking higher learning. And so, no, you make them, you turn it around on them and tell them what services do they have? How are they going to support you? That's what you want to hear from them, not, a recommendation to change your major. So, he struggled, but he completed, a math degree. So that's just kind of a little circle and a little thing that I have, pride in.
So,
But overall, what's in between is, you know, um, raising these two sons for the world that I think we're going to have,
mhm.
not the world that we're in. And so I took a lot of inspiration from Maya Angelou in that sense. I think I read an article where she and primarily her son talked about what it was, what she did and how she raised him, to see beyond the conditions that they were in that moment. So, what happened in between is that, and then also, of course, my own efforts towards social justice, that were really connected with creating spaces for the voices and for the struggles and for the critique, that, we shouldn't be living this way. And so I found my way to different organizations over time. The one I have worked with the longest is a newspaper, the Tribuno del Pueblo, but I have been active in, and I've learned a lot from educational struggles. The Trinational Coalition in Defense of Public Education was really important because it had educators from Canada, the US, and Mexico. And it was really a product of the North American Free Trade Agreement in 1994, which of course also was the new form of the Zapatista movement. So for me, all of those efforts since 94 have been ways in which that I can participate and learn and grow and hopefully prepare us for really transforming society, to one that respects people.
Can we talk about a little about I mean, thank you for sharing the story of your sons as well. I mean, we see that this is not something from the ugly distant past. This is something that's continuing on to this day. Can you talk about a little bit about your work with the Tribuno de Pueblo, how you first got involved with that paper?
Yeah, I think it was. So I had known about it for a long time because it has a long history. I think it goes back to like the 70s and the farm worker struggles in Texas, particularly. I was just a little kid in the 70s, so I didn't really connect with it until the 90s. I want to say, the mega marches of the 90s. And I joined the editorial board maybe 20 years ago. So it's a small newspaper. It's an independent paper. We get no corporate money. No one is paid. We all do this as our serious political work. And through working with the paper, I have been a writer, a correspondent. I had the opportunity to travel to Venezuela in 2006 for the World Social Forum um, as a correspondent with the the Economic Human Rights Poor People's
For
Campaign.
People's Economic Human Rights Campaign.
Yeah, if I don't have it in front of me, I lose it. Um,
Paper.
so that was an incredible experience. I translated in front of dozens of media outlets. I was walking around with two National Guardsmen. One of them was from New Orleans, and they wore their U.S. flag upside down. And they told their stories about, what it was like to be, I want to say, Afghanistan, just sitting around and then watching New Orleans, where they live, not get any help from the government. And they're sitting, abroad with all of the um, tools, right, and personnel that could have been deployed to assist. We know the National Guard eventually did called in, but not to help, right? Like we saw the headlines, they came in with AK-47, so that's how they weren't really there to help the people. But I was in Venezuela. Of course, Hugo Chavez was still there, and I got a chance to be a part of the delegation that sat way in the front, like just feet away,
Yeah.
from where he was speaking. And I had never heard anyone, in this country ever, right, mention and highlight workers and people and humanity and morality, and how the government's responsibility, right, is to ensure, these things. That was really, really incredible. So with the paper, I had a chance to do that. I also went to the Border Social Forum. That was a tremendous effort by border organizations. I want to say 2007. I didn't prepare well with my dates. But no, but this work with the paper is incredible. I've had a chance to meet fighters, from all over the world, all over the country. And the fighters in this country, man, we always think, yes, other countries have different, right, histories and experiences, and like we can't point to a Zapatista movement the way Mexico can, or or Central America, right, that has this history of fight and heart and struggle. But we just don't have a way to flash light on the struggles here, but they're just as dedicated, they're just as incredible and brave, and even more so. I learned, that's why, I connected with people that use that term belly of the beast, that rather than beating up our class brothers and sisters, and understanding of what does it take to fucking survive in the belly of the beast? What kind of ideological warfare have they perpetuated on us? And here's where racism comes in over the decades in order to maintain a system, right? And how else do you explain people, living under these conditions, going to work every day and mustering up, the humanity to help each other, like we're doing in this moment. It is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So like in this moment, we see a lot of people involved in, they always come up with a new term to describe what they're doing. So now I guess it's called mutual aid. But we see in this moment, we see a lot of things happening. We see in El Sereno, people seizing houses. We see a lot of the work that Sherry's doing, still doing, and has been doing for decades in Philadelphia. We see Oakland. There's a lot of activity up there too. All throughout the country, we see that. Meanwhile, we see the U.S. government ramping up sanctions against Nicaragua, ramping up sanctions against Iran, threatening to send warships to Venezuela, issuing an arrest warrant for Maduro. How is it that even in the midst of a global pandemic, that the United States of America is still waging war, whether it be economic or whatever?
Yeah. I think, probably since World War II, the ramp up of the militarization of the entire country, um, you know, hasn't stopped. And it only, changes a little bit based on the target. Um, but um, but that's always been, the military industrial complex. They shut down Todd Shipyard, right? Because there's no need for that anymore. There's no, as automation and the things that we need more and more are part of a global system where it is deemed that, steel is going to come from Brazil and other things are going to come from Japan, right? Or Mexico or Thailand. That why the destruction of the industrial base of this country makes it so that war is the only way that they can prop up this system, for now. I don't think this is going to continue for too long, because especially now when we see the hunger and the destitution, right, that so many people find themselves in, and that this is going to grow, is going to make it impossible for them to kind of rule in the old way, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So why is it that China's able to build a hospital in 10 days, and in the United States of America, we got ventilators, and we got veterinarians donating ventilators?
isn't that shameful? I mean, they talk on TV about, oh, I was just listening, yesterday. Oh, the masks are coming. They'll be here in July. What? Masks? Are you kidding me? Masks. It took you. We, who are you? Why? How could you? How could you sit up there and look at us in the face, with all of this, people sick and people dying, and you're talking about masks are coming? Like I don't even know, right? How there is no reason, right, that we have more than enough. I mean, I was just like, man, how much do they spend on war, right? We started talking about war. We started talking about, this industrial era. We have the wherewithal to produce everything, but they don't want to do it until they can make money off of it. And they're going
Right.
to make money off of the masks, the ventilators, and the death. So they're okay with all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So how is it that Cuba, again, facing a global pandemic, is able to send doctors all over the world, and meanwhile, in the United States of America, we have a president who's suggesting that we drink bleach?
I, you know, what do you say? What do you say to that shit? I just, I'm just kind of sitting back asking those questions. And basically, the next question is, how are the American people thinking going to change as a result of this experience? And then, and who and how are we, and again, those of us that like with the work with the tribuno, how do we put, um, I don't know, memes might be the new way, or slogans or themes, or, these ideas, that I think we all have in the pit of our stomach, into a rallying cry that we can get behind.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Democrats are not doing anything useful,
No.
right now.
Useless. Yeah.
And in fact have been complicit, right, in getting us to where we are. So I don't really see the logic in, right, no one should be rewarded for being complicit in this bullshit. So so the question that I keep thinking is, how is the thinking of the people in this country going to change? How is that thinking going to be expressed, in action?
Yeah.
But May 1st is coming, so I think we'll get one way of looking at it. I know today, there were a number of actions, around the red strike. And it's a powerful moment, because all the things that you and I and others have been saying for a long time, people are, really living it now in a way that, and not just, I mean, a lot of people, I'm not saying things got bad. I guess what I'm saying, we're living it together, because in the past, again, one of the tools of imperialism and, this country is to have us think that we're not really connected, right? This individualism. Oh, this is my fault. Oh, this is my problem. Oh, this is my people. And now this pandemic is kind of helping to unite us and say, we can't just take care of a few, right? We have to take care of everyone. Like, even a virus knows this bullshit.
So okay, why I've asked this question to other people, and the answer is relatively obvious, but I'm very interested in how people, how they express it differently, and bring unique insight into this question. It's a fairly obvious question, but why is it that a market system cannot provide the goods and necessities, that we need at this time, during a health pandemic?
Well, I don't think, well, I think you said market, but I'm going to let that go for a minute. I don't think it's that it can't, it's that it won't. right? That is the biggest contradiction, that we have the wherewithal. You know, there were other periods, again, as a history teacher, there were other periods where there actually was not enough. I think one of the biggest ideas to get across is that we don't have a scarcity problem. Again, when they're telling us the masks will be here in July, that's bullshit, right? We don't have a scarcity problem. We have a distribution problem.
Mhm.
We have the ability to feed, house, clothe, everybody, masks, ventilate. There's the ability is there. I don't think anybody doubts that. And so I think now, again, this moment is helping us look at how is this society organized? How does distribution happen? Because I think we're starting to hopefully see that we can't continue this way.
Yeah, I mean, I share your hopes. Share your hopes. I think that people should be woken up by this moment, to see just the fact of the matter. I mean, we could talk about like capitalism and capital, and how like money regulates all our experiences, and we can make up these like make believe scenarios and try and do that. But in real time, you wake up, you work, you get a paycheck, you go to the market, and you buy your stuff, right? And that seems to be working, right? And so like when you like, well, yeah, but like people like, like they kind of like it seems very theoretical. But in this moment, we can really see what it means not to have any guarantees. Like what does it mean to live life without guarantee? And I think that this moment really offers an opportunity to be like, you see what I fucking told you? I fucking told you. Like, because, and you can see it in real time. So I think that that's really an opportunity to get across this point of view that, that can clearly explain the world. I mean, like, I don't know. I run this thing weekly with a professor from Cal State Dominguez Hills, and we were talking about this idea of the commodity fetish, which is like Marx's weird way of talking, right? But what I basically said in the conversation was that, like, imagine there's a restaurant, and then outside the restaurant is a guy and a bear, right? Now in the restaurant there's the cashier, and there's the kitchen, and there's a sandwich. Now the bear will walk through the door past the cashier and go eat the sandwich, right? But a guy will go in his car, he'll pick out a guitar, he'll take his hat, throw it on the ground, start singing a song to try and get people to give him money so he can go inside and buy the sandwich, right? And that's how we live. That's how we live. Like money stands in between all our interactions, and we think that makes us smart. We're far dumber than bears, far more ridiculous than bears, in my opinion. Anyways, we're just the way we do things is so convoluted and unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some unnecessary steps in our lives.
Yeah. Talk about unnecessary as we talk about people going back to work. A lot of jobs are unnecessary. A lot of people do stupid things. I guess, like, like extra steps that are totally unnecessary in today's, high tech world.
Right.
If we kind of really use the technology without worrying about ensuring. Another thing I just read, I think today or yesterday, that 8 human beings, 8 people, own half of the wealth in the world.
Jesus.
8 people, not 8 countries, 8 individuals that walk, just like me and you walk around. Um, there's no, so I don't like, I run out of words when you
Yeah.
look at this kind of thing. But yeah, if if jobs, which I think more and more, some of these jobs are not going to come back. A lot of people are looking for ways to eliminate workers, and they were doing that before the pandemic, right? With automatic checkout and all of these things. And, before it was kind of more sympathetic. People would be like, no, I'm going to the person so that I'm trying to save their job. rather than going to the automated cashier. Well, now with the pandemic, right now it's dangerous to be a cashier. Now it's, dangerous. So I almost feel like they're going to take advantage and go where they were going even faster, with this automation.
Yeah.
So more people are going to need to survive without a job in the old sense.
Right.
And 8 people own half the wealth. This is really not a problem that cannot be solved. How many times has humanity faced problems that cannot be solved? Like right now, right? This pandemic. But this other thing can be solved.
Yeah.
We just gotta
Absolutely.
decide to fucking do it.
Gotta do it. No, what you're saying speaks profoundly to me. I was born in 1981, and that set me up to participate in something called the service economy. All my life, I was told the industrial economy has died. It died maybe 2, 3 years after I was born. When I was 3 years old or something like that. Maybe I don't know. Maybe a year before I was born. Maybe when I was born, 2 years after. It died somewhere around my infancy. And then by the time I was getting ready to work for us, I've been told this whole time you're gonna have to be fair for the service economy. You're gonna have 7 jobs. That's just the way it is. And then when I get into the service economy, my life in the service economy, somewhere in the middle of that, I was told the service economy has died. Now it's the gig economy. And I think the gig economy is getting ready to die, and it's going to be replaced by the scrounge economy or something. And so like this is just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And we need to seize the means of production. I mean, it becomes life and death now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's been a wonderful hour. Is there any way people can follow up with you, follow up with the work you're doing, follow up with the People's Tribune?
Yeah, we would.
Or,
I would definitely like to encourage folks to go to tribunodelpueblo.org. Check out the articles, contribute articles and videos. We're opening up a YouTube channel. Young people really love, sharing their stories and connecting up. And the Tribuno is an important tool that can be used towards that. You'll find videos. Let's see, during the caravans of 2018, a number of us went down to the border and connected with border organizations. And we conducted interviews. And so you'll see the voices of, the people that are really in the front lines. Soon after that, we're invited to go to Texas for the, similar kind of a tour. And right before the pandemic hit, all of that work had culminated in a border tour. We were going to actually, conduct a tour all the way along the border to connect and highlight the people that are, putting their bodies right in front of this vicious and violent machine. And so we're postponing that, but hopefully it will still happen in some way or another. So stay tuned and support the paper.
Okay, we got links below, and I thank you, Marie, for your time. It's been, I laughed, I cried. It's been thorough. It's been, and you made me think. So I really appreciate it, and I'm
Great.
sure.
Congratulations, Matt. This is a tremendous effort. Oral histories and are so powerful. And I don't know, 100 years when people look back, or hopefully not that long, maybe 50
Yeah.
years or 20 or 30 years, people are going to look back and how we think people are backwards, right? When
Yeah.
different eras, like Jim Crow and all of this stuff, we think, God, how backwards. Hopefully they'll look back, at some of this footage and understand how people wrestled with these contradictions, right? That
Yeah.
result in the loss of life unnecessarily for so long.
Right.
So
They won't think we were just all drinking bleach. That's good.
yes. So thank you for
All right.
your work too.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate it.
Nos vemos. Bye.
Vamos.